I'm not a pilot, but I love me a good pilot watch. I mean, who doesn't? They're typically easy wearing, sturdy pieces that nowadays usually come with 100 meters of water resistance. Those attributes mean they appeal to a wide range of people. If you're looking for one for yourself, there's a lot of great options out there, with most being heavily inspired by mid-century designs like the famous IWC Mark series. But there's a few that truly feel more modern and maybe even a little futuristic, both inside and out. Like this watch, the Oris ProPilot X Caliber 400. Now, I didn't go flying a plane in this thing, but I did do some regular old things that regular old folk like myself do on an average day, like walking a dog, her name is Mowgli, and hanging out at a winery in my hometown just to see how this pilot watch handles regular old life. The Oris ProPilot X Caliber 400 comes in 4 colors. The most recent and probably the most talked about of the bunch is this Kermit the Frog version, which I only spent a few minutes with, but if the Muppets isn't your thing, then there's the 3 that I got to spend a week with, which was the still fun salmon pink version, a versatile blue version, and a stealthy gray version, which was my favorite of the bunch. They were all derived from the 2019 ProPilot X Caliber 115 that had a 44mm titanium case and a skeletonized dial with an in-house manual winding movement that had a massive 10-day power reserve. That watch is $8,000. The Caliber 400 version was released only a few years later in 2022 and still comes in a lightweight titanium case, but in a much leaner 39mm diameter that's 12mm thick and with an in-house automatic movement with only 5 days worth of power, which is still much higher than today's average. It's also rated at 100 meters water resistant. These watches are $4,300. If you've followed Oris for a while, then that price tag might surprise you, but you have to consider this. For a while, most, if not all of their watches utilized off-the-shelf third-party movements, which helped to keep the cost typically below $3,000. With the introduction of their in-house movements, prices for these pieces have crept up a tad, which is to be expected since a lot of money is needed for R&D. Not only does the Caliber 400 have a large 5-day power reserve thanks to its twin barrels, but it's really accurate as well. Oris says the daily deviation rate is between -3 to +5 seconds per day. Was that true? Well, I mainly wore the gray version and it only gained about 1 second per day from hanging out on my wrist, which is excellent. The watch is also fairly resistant to magnetic fields. I didn't test this, but Oris states it only deviates 10 seconds per day when exposed to 2,250 Gauss. That's pretty good when you consider the magnet you hang out with the most is in your iPhone and it produces less than 150 Gauss, so Oris definitely has you covered there. Oris is actually so confident in their new in-house movements that they offer a 10-year warranty and only recommend servicing your watch once every 10 years. That's impressive, especially for a recently developed movement. For comparison, the biggest brand of them all, Rolex, only offers a 5-year warranty, but the same service interval of around 10 years, which is still good. The insides of the watch are well worth the $4,300 when compared to other Pilot watches with a similar price, but what about the whole package? A watch isn't only the movement. Well, I really love the case, bracelet, and especially the clasp. The dial, I don't love, but I like, and we'll get into that. First, the 39mm case hits that sweet spot of not too big and not too small. It'll fit a variety of wrist sizes, and I found it looked awesome on my 7.25-inch wrist. Some people don't like titanium for its lightness and dark gray hue, saying that it feels cheap, but I like it for those exact reasons. Wearing a light watch is refreshing, especially since I only own stainless steel watches, and I can see myself one day owning something similar in weight to the ProPilot X, maybe even the ProPilot X. One of my favorite design elements of the case is the jet engine bezel motif that ties in with the Pilot theme, but also gives it a modern or even more futuristic look that you won't find in a run-of-the-mill Pilot watch. On the back of the case, you also get a see-through case back, which is good for admiring the in-house movement I discussed earlier. The serpentine-style 3-link bracelet is also a fun design that gives it a slick, futuristic look. It was comfortable for me and didn't pull any of my hairs, but I don't have a lot of wrist hair. One thing to note was the screws were much smaller than I'm used to. So much smaller that I didn't have a screwdriver small enough to adjust the bracelet size myself, so I had to bring it to my local AD for that. Speaking of sizing, the clasp doesn't have any micro adjustment capabilities, which is a drag, but the design looks so badass. It's got Oris's patented lift system that's supposed to look like the seatbelt buckle you'd find on an airplane. It even says lift in a similar typeface you'd see on those buckles. I found myself opening and closing the clasp just for fun all throughout the day. It's not something that you'd immediately notice since you'll spend most of your time looking at a watch's dial, but it's a nice touch that I definitely appreciate, and once you see, you'll never get sick of. The dial of the ProPilot X is a mainly flat affair with printed indices, a printed chapter ring, and printed branding with a date indicator at the 6 o'clock position. The sword hands are all flat, filled with super luminova for those times you need a little glow to help you tell the time. Look, most pilot watches have printed dials, but most pilot watches tend to be kinda traditional with heavy inspiration from mid-century timepieces. This is a modern, semi-futuristic take on a pilot watch, and I would have liked to see a little more depth in the dial. Maybe applied indices or maybe an applied logo. I'm no designer, so maybe that would have thrown things off, but I'm a sucker for dial depth, and I think it would have benefited from it, especially with such a cool case. Where Oris kind of makes up for this is the fact that the dial options are really cool. If you like fun colors, Oris definitely has you covered with salmon and Kermit variations, or if you like something more subdued, blue isn't too bad either. And if you like the stealthy, more serious look, then gray is definitely your best choice, or at least it was mine. So after spending time with the Oris ProPilot X Caliber 400, I can confidently say that it handles everyday life just fine. It's a great size, feels comfortable, and has an in-house movement with practical benefits of being accurate, with a long power reserve, and decade-long service intervals. Even though I wish the clasp included micro adjustments, and I wish the dial had a little more depth, the seatbelt buckle inspired lift clasp and fun colors kinda make up for it. Kinda. Nonetheless, this is a really good watch that I think has enough solid features and a unique enough design for anyone that's into pilot watches to pay some attention to.